You're embarrassing this family, Mom hissed, her voice slicing through the low hum of the Capitol grill like a serrated blade. She leaned toward the senator's aide, sitting next to her, her smile tight and apologetic. I'm so sorry. Lux is currently in transition. She's doing some virtual assistant work until she finds a real career. You know how it is. Failure to launch. Across the table, my brother Tyler smirked over his scotch. He tapped his state trooper badge, making sure it caught the light. Virtual assistant, he sneered. Loud enough for the next table to hear. Mom. Stop coddling her. She's 34 and renting a shoebox. The word you're looking for is deadbeat. End quote. I didn't flinch. I took a sip of ice water and stared at the white tablecloth. In my line of work, you learn that silence isn't weakness, it's intel gathering. And I was about to collect. The heavy oak doors swung open. The room's energy shifted instantly. Alexander walked in. The groom. Chloe's fiancé. An Air Force Special Tactics officer in full service dress. Medals gleaming under the recessed lighting. He looked like a recruiting poster come to life. My father. The retired colonel. It stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. There he is, Dad boomed. Beaming with the kind of pride he'd never wasted on me. The man of the hour. Alexander smiled. Shaking hands. Commanding the room. He walked past my father. He walked past Chloe, who was already puckering up for a kiss. He stopped directly in front of me. The smile vanished. He froze. His eyes locked onto mine with a shock that bordered on terror. He didn't hug me. He didn't wave. In front of the entire restaurant. In front of my sneering brother and my apologizing mother. Alexander snapped his heels together and threw me a rigid, perfect salute. Ma'am, he said. His voice was clear as a bell. My father's fork clattered onto his plate. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Before we go any further, I want to know, have you ever been the person holding everything together while everyone else pretends you don't exist? Drop a yes in the comments if you know exactly what that silence feels like. Let me know where you're listening from tonight. To my family, I am a ghost. A useful ghost. Maybe. But a ghost, nonetheless. To them, I am Lux. The disappointment. The one who didn't follow the plan. The one who rents a one-bedroom apartment in Alexandria instead of buying a townhouse in Georgetown. The one who drives a 5-year-old sedan while they lease luxury SUVs. They see the surface. They see the lack of a uniform. They see the absence of a title they can brag about at the country club. What they don't see, what they can't see, is the rest of the iceberg. By day, I am a senior strategic analyst for a civilian intelligence agency that operates in the gray zones of national security. I don't wear a uniform because my work doesn't happen on a parade ground. It happens in windowless rooms with secure terminals, analyzing threat vectors that would keep my father awake for a week. I authorize operations. I manage assets. I make decisions that move millions of dollars and save lives. All before my family has finished their morning coffee. But to them, I'm the girl who needs help with her rent. Or at least, that's the narrative they've built. It started years ago. The slow erosion of my identity. My father, the colonel, respected rank. My mother, the administrator, respected status. My siblings followed suit. Tyler became a cop because he liked the authority. Chloe went into PR because she liked the spotlight. And me, I went dark. My work required discretion. NDAs weren't just paperwork, they were a lifestyle. I couldn't talk about my day. So they assumed my day was empty. And because I was quiet, they assumed I was weak. And because they thought I was weak, they thought I was theirs to use. Take last month. My mother needed emergency dental surgery. Implants. Bone grafts. The works. $18,500. Insurance laughed at the claim. Dad claimed he was liquidating some assets but couldn't get the cash in time. He called me in a panic. Not asking for help, but complaining about the injustice of the system. I wired the money to the oral surgeon that afternoon. 18 grand. Paid in full. When Mom came out of anesthesia, groggy and sore, she didn't thank me. She told Aunt Linda on the phone. Oh. It was a miracle. The insurance company finally saw reason. We have such good coverage. I stood there, holding her ice pack, and said nothing. I didn't correct her. I let her have her dignity. even if it cost me mine. It was a transaction. I paid for peace. Then there was Tyler. My brother. The state trooper. The one who calls me deadbeat. 6 weeks ago. He got flagged for an excessive force complaint. It was bad. Career-ending bad. A video that was about to go viral. He was facing suspension. Maybe charges. He was terrified. He called me. Drunk. Rambling about how the world was out to get him. I made 2 phone calls. I used a favor from a contact in the state attorney's office, a man who owed me for a tip I'd given him on a trafficking ring. The video lost context. The complaint was buried in a pile of bureaucratic backlog. Tyler kept his badge. He thinks he got lucky. He thinks the system just worked out for him. He has no idea that the sister he mocks at dinner is the only reason he's still wearing a uniform. I kept these secrets not out of shame, but out of necessity. In my world, leverage is everything. You don't show your hand until you're ready to win the pot. But sitting there at the Capitol Grill, watching Alexander salute me, watching my father's jaw hit the table, I realized something. I wasn't holding a winning hand. I was the dealer, and the game was rigged. Back at the table, the air was thick with the scent of expensive steak and performative humility. The dinner hadn't officially started, but the campaign to erase me was already in full swing. My sister Chloe sat at the head of the table, radiating the specific, blinding glow of a bride-to-be who knows she has secured the perfect accessory, a hero husband. The room was practically a shrine to Alexander's career. Framed photos of him in varying degrees of tactical gear lined the mantel of the private dining room. My mother, Patricia, was working the room like a seasoned politician. She moved from guest to guest, a glass of Chardonnay in one hand and a weaponized smile on her lips. I watched her lean in toward Uncle Dave, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that carried perfectly to my seat. "We're just happy Lux could make it," she said, casting a pitying glance in my direction. "She's been struggling to find her footing. You know, it's hard when you don't have a clear direction. But we think this data entry gig might be good for her. Low stress." I took a bite of a breadstick. It tasted like ash. This wasn't just idle gossip. It was a preemptive strike. They were building a firewall around their own egos. If they defined me as a failure before the appetizers arrived, then nothing I said later could hurt them. It was a whisper campaign, designed to lower everyone's expectations so low that my mere presence felt like a charity case. Across the table, my cousin Sarah looked at me with wide, sympathetic eyes. "So, Lux?" she asked, her voice dripping with condensation. "Data entry, is that fulfilling? It pays the bills," I said simply. Chloe laughed. A tinkling, fragile sound. "Barely, but we're proud of her for trying. Not everyone is cut out for the high-stakes world." "Right." Then Tyler stood up. He tapped a spoon against his glass. The sound, sharp and demanding. He was already swaying slightly, his face flushed with scotch and self-importance. "I want to propose a toast," he announced, raising his glass. "To Alexander. A real man. A real hero. Someone who actually puts his life on the line." He paused, his eyes sliding over to me with a sneer. "Unlike some people in this room who think typing on a laptop saves lives. To the ones who wear the uniform, not the ones who hide behind screens. Here." Here my father bellowed, raising his glass. The table laughed. It was a collective release of tension. A bonding moment built on my exclusion. I didn't react. I didn't defend myself. I didn't point out that the screen I hid behind was currently tracking a terror cell moving across the Mediterranean. I didn't mention that the typing I did was the only reason Tyler wasn't currently suspended without pay. I just sat there, observing them. In my line of work, we call this the iceberg success theory. My family operates on surface area. To them, power is what you can see. It's the badge on Tyler's belt. It's the ribbons on Dad's old uniform. It's the title on Chloe's business card. They believe that if it isn't loud, it isn't real. They think success is a parade. But in the world I inhabit, the real world of power, success is invisible. The most powerful people in the room are never the ones making the most noise. They are the ones sitting quietly in the back, holding the kill switch. If you have to wear a uniform to prove you matter, you aren't the one making the decisions. You're the one taking orders. My silence wasn't weakness. It was discipline. It was the restraint of a handler managing volatile assets. I looked at Tyler, preening in his rented spotlight. And I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt the cold, clinical detachment of a scientist observing a specimen under a microscope. They were so loud. And they were so incredibly fragile. You know, Chloe said, leaning toward me. Her voice syrupy, sweet. Alexander invited a few of his commanding officers tonight. Maybe you shouldn't mention the virtual assistant thing. It's a little embarrassing. Just say you're in school. I looked at her. I looked at the fear behind her eyes, the terror that I might crack the perfect porcelain surface of her life. Don't worry, Chloe, I said, picking up my water glass. I won't say a word. I didn't have to. The doors were opening. Alexander walked through the door, and the entire restaurant seemed to tilt on its axis. He moved with a kind of kinetic grace that drew every eye in the room. But he wasn't looking at the crowd. He wasn't looking at the waiters or the hostess or the other patrons who had paused mid-chew to stare. He walked past my father, who was practically vibrating with the urge to clap him on the back. He walked past Chloe, who had risen slightly from her chair. Her lips parted in a welcoming smile that faltered as he breezed by. He stopped at our end of the table, directly in front of me. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. Alexander looked down at me. His face was unreadable. A mask of professional stoicism. But his eyes were burning. He didn't reach out. He didn't offer a hand or a hug or a polite nod. He snapped his heels together. The sound was sharp, precise, military. He brought his hand up in a crisp, perfect salute. Ma'am, he said. The word hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. My father's fork hit his plate with a clatter that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. Chloe sank back into her chair, her face draining of color. Tyler's mouth hung open, a piece of bread halfway to his lips. Alexander held the salute. He didn't waver. He didn't break eye contact. He waited. I felt the weight of every gaze in the room pressing down on me. My mother's horrified confusion. My brother's disbelief. My sister's growing panic. This wasn't just a greeting. It was a declaration. It was a line drawn in the sand with a diamond-tipped cutter. At ease. Major, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. He dropped his hand but remained at attention. I apologize for the interruption. Ma'am, he said, his tone formal, respectful. I was briefed this morning by my commanding officer. I wasn't aware. I didn't know you were the Lux. My father found his voice first. It was a strangled, confused sound. Major Alexander. What are you doing? That's just Lux. She's Chloe's sister. Alexander turned his head slowly to look at my father. The warmth that usually lit up his face when he looked at my family was gone, replaced by a cold, hard stare. With all due respect, Colonel, Alexander said, and the title sounded less like an honorific and more like an accusation. This isn't just Lux. This is the senior strategic analyst who authorized the asset redirect in Kabul 3 years ago. He turned back to me. You're the reason my team made it out of the extraction zone. You're the reason 6 men came home to their families instead of coming home in boxes. Chloe let out a small, choked sound. What? The extraction. Alexander continued, his voice rising just enough to carry to the corners of the room. We were pinned down. No air support. Command was debating risk versus reward. We were written off. He looked at me again, his expression raw. Then the order came down. Override authorization. Asset redirect. Immediate extraction. Someone high up had put their career on the line to pull us out. He took a step closer. I've spent 3 years trying to find out who signed that order. Who saved us? He shook his head, looking at me with a mixture of awe and disbelief. And here you are, sitting at this table while they call you a deadbeat. The silence that followed was suffocating. It was the sound of a worldview shattering. My family stared at me. My mother, who had lied about my job to save face. My brother, who had mocked my typing. My father, who worshipped the uniform but ignored the woman who commanded it. I saw the realization hit them in waves. The cognitive dissonance was almost visible. They couldn't reconcile the Lux, they knew the failure. The disappointment with the woman Alexander was describing. I didn't know. My father stammered. His face gray. You never said. I couldn't. I said simply. But. Data entry, Chloe whispered. You said data entry. I said, I work with data. I corrected her. My voice cool. I never said I entered it. I looked at Alexander. Thank you. Major. It was my job. Nothing more. It was everything. He said fiercely. To me. To my men. It was everything. I looked around the table. The whisper campaign had evaporated. The narrative they had built, the one where I was small and they were big, was gone. In its place was the cold, hard truth. They needed me to be a failure. Because if I was a success, if I was powerful, respected, consequential, then their treatment of me wasn't just tough love or concern. It was cruelty. It was negligence. It was abuse. I saw it in their eyes. The fear. The shame. The desperate need to rewrite history. To claim they knew all along. To find a way back to the moral high ground. But there was no way back. The bridge was burned. And Alexander had just lit the match. It was just a paperwork error. My father blurted out. His voice loud and desperate. Trying to shove the genie back into the bottle. He forced a laugh that sounded like dry leaves crunching. Alexander. You've clearly been misinformed. Lux, she helps with spreadsheets. She's not command. Tyler chimed in. Desperate to reclaim the alpha status he'd lost in the last 30 seconds. Yeah. Seriously? Cute story. But Lux can't even handle her own rent. You think she's authorizing military extractions? She probably just filed the report after the real heroes did the work. Alexander didn't look at them. He didn't even blink. He kept his eyes locked on mine. As if we were the only two people in the room. The extraction code was, red actual. Alexander said. His voice low, but cutting through the room like a laser. That code requires a level 5 clearance. It requires the signature of a senior strategic analyst with direct oversight of theater assets. That signature was yours. I nodded slowly. It was a Tuesday. I said. My voice calm. 0400 hours local time. You were pinned down in the Arghandab Valley. 2 wounded. Air support was grounded due to a dust storm. Command wanted to wait it out. Alexander's breath hitched. They told us we were on our own. They tried to. I corrected. I overruled the theater commander. I redirected a drone surveillance package from a priority target 300 miles away to give you eyes on the enemy flank. Then I authorized a private contractor extraction team that was operating off the books in the sector. I spent $40 million of the agency's black budget in 10 minutes to get you a ride home. I took a sip of my wine. I remember because the paperwork was a headache. The table was silent. The kind of silence that screams. Tyler looked like he was going to be sick. He was staring at me. Really staring at me. For the first time in his life. He was realizing that while he was writing speeding tickets and feeling like a god, I was moving pieces on a board he didn't even know existed. But it was my mother's face that held my attention. She wasn't looking at me with pride. She wasn't looking at me with awe. She was looking at me with terror. And in that moment, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I suddenly understood everything. I understood the insults. The exclusion. The virtual assistant lies. This is the narcissistic narrative. My family didn't treat me like a failure because they thought I was one. Deep down, they suspected I wasn't. They sensed a strength in me that didn't match the role they had assigned. And it terrified them. They needed me to be the failure. Their entire identity, their hierarchy, their self-worth was built on the foundation that they were the successful ones, and I was the burden. My father felt like a big man, because he had to worry about me. My mother felt like a martyr because she had to apologize for me. Tyler felt powerful because he could look down on me. If I was successful, if I was actually more powerful, more consequential, and more respected than all of them combined, then who were they? If the deadbeat is actually a titan, then the heroes are just insecure bullies in costumes. My success didn't just contradict their story, it annihilated their egos. They weren't angry because I lied, they were angry because I was the truth. And the truth made them look small. You, my mother whispered, her voice trembling. You let us think. You let us pay for dinner. I didn't let you do anything, I said coldly. You decided who I was. You wrote the script. I just stopped reading my lines. Alexander finally turned to look at them. His expression was one of pure, unadulterated disgust. You called her a deadbeat, he said to Tyler. The menace in his voice was palpable. You sat there, drinking wine she probably paid for. And you mocked the woman who signed the order that allows me to stand here today. He stood up straighter, buttoning his jacket. The movement was final. I think, Alexander said, that I've heard enough. We didn't know. My father stammered, his voice losing all its command. He looked small suddenly, stripped of the authority he'd worn like armor for 40 years. Lux. Honey. You have to understand. With the secrecy. How are we supposed to know? Yeah. Chloe chimed in, her laugh shrill and frantic. We were just teasing, you know how this family is. We roast the ones we love. It's our love language. I watched them scramble. It was pathetic. They were trying to rewrite reality in real time. Desperate to find a version of events where they weren't the villains. They wanted me to smile. They wanted me to say, it's okay. I understand. They wanted permission to go back to being the heroes of their own story. I didn't give it to them. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply raised my hand and signaled the waiter. He appeared instantly. Sensing the shift in power dynamics, like a shark senses blood in the water. The check. Please. I said. No. No. My mother reached across the table. Her bracelets jingling. Lux. Put your hand down. Your father is paying. This is Chloe's night. Dad can't afford this dinner, I said calmly. Not with the vintage Cabernet, Tyler ordered. Not after the dental surgery I paid for last month. My father flinched. My mother went still. The waiter placed the black leather folder on the table. I opened it. $8,400. Tyler had really enjoyed that wine. I pulled out my card, the heavy, black metal, one that doesn't have a limit, and placed it on the receipt. Lux. Stop. Tyler growled. Though he didn't reach for his wallet. You're making a scene. You're trying to buy us off. Is that it? You think money makes you better than us? I looked at him. I looked at the brother who had spent his entire life pushing me down to make himself feel tall. I looked at the badge on his belt, the badge he wore like a shield. I don't think I'm better than you. Tyler. I said softly. I know I'm the only reason you still have a job. He froze. What? The excessive force complaint. I said. 6 weeks ago. The traffic stop on I-95. The body cam footage that mysteriously got corrupted before it could be uploaded to the review board. His face went white. The color drained out of him so fast he looked like a ghost. You. How do you? I made the call. I said. I called the district attorney. I called the systems administrator. I cashed in a favor I've been holding for 2 years to bury that file, so you wouldn't get suspended. I leaned forward. You didn't get lucky. Tyler? You got managed. You're welcome for the badge. He slumped back in his chair. Destroyed. The silence was absolute. I signed the receipt. I added a 25% tip. I stood up, smoothing the front of my dress. Alexander. I said, turning to the man who had started the fire. Thank you. For everything. I'm leaving with you, he said immediately, reaching for his cover. No. I said, stay. Eat the steak. Drink the wine. Make them look at you, and remember every single lie they told. I picked up my purse. I looked at my family one last time. They looked like strangers. They looked like liabilities I had finally cleared from my ledger. Enjoy the dinner. I said. It's paid for. I turned and walked out. I didn't look back. I walked through the heavy oak doors, past the hostess stand, and out into the cool Virginia night. My phone started buzzing in my purse before I even reached my car. Text messages. Calls. My mother begging me to come back. Chloe asking what I meant. Tyler. Tyler didn't text. He knew better. I took my phone out. I didn't block them. That would be emotional. Instead, I opened my settings and disabled notifications for the group chat. I archived the threads. I silenced the noise. I got into my car and started the engine. The dashboard glowed with a soft, steady light. I felt lighter than I had in 20 years. The briefing was over. The operation was complete. I was clear. It's been 42 days since the dinner. I didn't go to the wedding. I didn't send a gift. I didn't send a card. When the date came and went, I was busy authorizing a satellite repositioning over the Pacific. I didn't even look at the clock until it was past midnight. I requested a transfer to a new tactical division deep in the heart of D.C. My new office has glass walls and a view of the Potomac. It's quiet here. The kind of quiet that comes from competence, not emptiness. My phone is peaceful. I blocked them all in the parking lot that night. And I haven't undone it. I don't know if my mother is still crying to her friends about how I ruined the engagement. I don't know if Tyler is still wearing his badge. Or if the fear of losing it has humbled him. I don't know if Chloe is happy. And for the first time in my life, I don't care. I did receive one email. It came to my secure work address 3 days after the dinner. It was from Alexander. Ma'am, I canceled the venue. We're doing something small. I just wanted you to know that I see you. You were the only honest thing in that room. Thank you for the extraction. And thank you for the wake-up call. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The transaction was complete. I spend a lot of time looking out this window. Thinking about that moment in the restaurant. I think about the urge I had to scream at them. To list every sacrifice I'd made. Every bill I'd paid. Every time I'd swallowed my pride to keep their fragile egos intact. I could have burned them down with words. I could have made them hurt the way they hurt me. But I didn't. I realized something that night. We call it the dignity of silence. There is a misconception that justice has to be loud. We think we need the big dramatic confrontation. The courtroom scene. The tearful apology. We think we need to force people to understand us. But you cannot explain your value to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You cannot make someone respect you if their entire self-image relies on looking down on you. Screaming at them would have just been another form of begging. It would have been me. Once again. Asking them to see me. True power doesn't need to scream. It doesn't need to explain. It just needs to exist. Paying that bill wasn't an act of generosity. It was an act of severance. It was me buying my freedom. It was the final proof that I didn't need them. I didn't owe them. And I was no longer playing their game. I am not the useful ghost anymore. I am not the deadbeat. I am the sovereign of my own life. And the view from here is spectacular. So here is my question to you. Is there a table you need to walk away from? Is there a silence you need to break? Or a silence you need to keep to protect your peace? Share this story if you believe respect shouldn't be something you have to beg for. And hit that subscribe button, because next week, we're talking about what happens when the black sheep finally becomes the wolf.